expansion was discussed both at a committee level and at the board, and ultimately the league office was tasked by our board with doing an in-depth analysis of all the issues around expansion, both.
Picture this: millions of viewers watching a live professional basketball game, completely unaware that a catastrophic technical failure is about to expose something the league spent months trying to hide. A single leaked audio recording. 90 seconds of unfiltered court-level chaos. That's all it took to trigger an executive meltdown at the highest levels of professional basketball and spark one of the most explosive controversies the sports world has seen in years. When a respected head coach and an elite star player went head-to-head in a raw, deeply personal verbal confrontation captured by parabolic microphones never meant for public consumption, it didn't just become another sports story. It became a watershed moment that exposed the massive gap between what fans see on polished broadcasts and what's actually happening behind the scenes when the cameras roll. What makes this incident truly terrifying for league executives isn't just the hostile language or the confrontation itself. It's what the leak reveals about the impossible task of controlling human emotion in an era where every word spoken on a professional stage can go viral within minutes. Adam Silver and his executive team thought they had systems in place. They thought they had safeguards. They thought wrong. And within hours, the sports world descended into complete chaos. Most people remember big sports moments for what happens on the court. The thunderous dunks, the clutch three-pointers, the defensive stops that shift momentum. But this story isn't about any of those things. This is about what nobody was supposed to hear. It started like any other intensely contested basketball game. Two teams pushing themselves to maximum effort, players competing at the highest level, coaches screaming instructions from the sideline. The atmosphere inside the arena was electric, the kind of energy you feel when every possession matters and every possession carries weight. Both squads were operating at absolute maximum intensity, treating a regular season matchup with the desperation of playoff basketball. As the game entered its final minutes, something shifted. The intensity that had been simmering all night finally boiled over. A transition drive toward the basket spiraled into a violent physical collision near the rim. The kind of contact that makes crowds jump to their feet and bench players rush toward the court. Whistles blew instantly. Players surged into the key. Coaching staff members rushed past the technical boundary. Game officials struggled to create a human barrier between the escalating groups. To the millions watching the primary national television broadcast, it was textbook sports drama. A controversial foul, an upcoming video replay review, the standard commercial break. Announcers were already beginning their analysis of whether contact was too severe, whether the call was justified. The infrastructure of professional sports coverage was functioning exactly as designed, creating narrative tension while maintaining complete editorial control over what viewers saw and heard. But behind that operational curtain, something nobody anticipated was happening. The league's technical operation always included multiple audio feeds running simultaneously. These secondary streams captured different perspectives from around the court, used for replay analysis and behind-the-scenes content production. There was never supposed to be any public exposure to these raw feeds. They were isolated, controlled, and restricted to internal league operations. Except this time, they weren't isolated at all. A technical malfunction left one of the secondary audio channels unmuted during the exact moment when the confrontation escalated. The parabolic microphones positioned directly adjacent to the scoring table and team benches captured everything with crystal clarity. For approximately 90 seconds, an unfiltered audio stream documenting every word, every shout, every explosive moment was being transmitted through systems that eventually found their way into the wrong hands. Nobody in the broadcast truck realized what was happening. The technical team was focused on managing the primary feed, coordinating camera angles, managing transitions. The secondary audio stream was supposed to be a passive backup system, purely internal, with no possible connection to public-facing distribution networks. That's what the documentation said. That's what everyone assumed. That assumption was catastrophically wrong. The raw courtside audio should have remained buried in archived server files, completely inaccessible to the outside world. But somewhere in that complex chain of technical systems, a door was left open. Maybe it was misconfigured routing. Maybe it was a forgotten backup transmission pathway that was supposed to be deactivated months earlier. Maybe it was a simple human error during a shift change. The exact cause would later become the subject of intense investigation, but the immediate reality was undeniable. Unfiltered, uncensored, deeply hostile audio was captured and stored in a location where someone with access could extract it. What made this situation uniquely explosive wasn't just that the audio existed. It was what that audio contained. Not standard athletic encouragement or routine play calls or the kind of competitive trash talk fans expect at the professional level. This was something rawer, something more personal, something that revealed a level of institutional tension that league executives had been quietly managing for months without the public realizing how serious the situation had become. The moment someone realized what was on that recording, they understood its explosive potential immediately. But by then, it was far too late to contain what would happen next. The audio began circulating. Slowly at first, shared among people with access to underground sports forums and private social media groups. Then faster. Then exponentially faster, spreading across digital platforms like wildfire, completely beyond anyone's ability to control it. Within hours, what was supposed to remain confidential operational audio was being heard by millions of people worldwide. And everyone who listened understood one thing immediately: this wasn't just a sports story anymore. This was an institutional crisis. To understand why this specific audio leak sent shockwaves through executive boardrooms and sparked emergency midnight conference calls, you need to understand the precise sequence of events that unfolded on the court floor before the technical system breached containment. The game itself had an unmistakable energy from the opening tip. Both teams were operating at an intensity that made it clear neither squad was taking anything for granted. Every defensive possession was contested fiercely. Every offensive drive was executed with precision. The referees were already under pressure just 30 minutes into the matchup, trying to manage the physical edge while keeping the game flowing at the pace that broadcast partners and modern audiences expect. As the game progressed toward its closing minutes, the intensity continued escalating. Coaches were standing, anticipating every play. Benches were active, engaged, every player mentally preparing for potential entry into the game. Fans in the arena were on their feet for extended stretches, sensing that something significant might happen before the final horn. The atmosphere had moved beyond typical regular season basketball into something that felt far more consequential. Then came the moment that triggered everything. A routine transition drive toward the basket started innocuously enough. An offensive player attacking the rim with purpose, a defender moving to contest. But this wasn't a passing moment of standard defensive pressure. DeJonai Carrington, renowned throughout the basketball community for her relentless, incredibly physical defensive style, moved to contest the drive with overwhelming force. Her approach wasn't subtle or cautious. It was exactly what her reputation demanded: aggressive, uncompromising, designed to send a message. She brought her arms down in a sweeping motion that connected with devastating impact. The offensive player tumbled awkwardly onto the baseline wood, their body crashing against the floor with enough force that everyone in the arena immediately recognized something significant had just happened. The referee whistles blew instantly, cutting through the arena noise. But that shrill sound was immediately swallowed by something more powerful: a deafening combination of bench shouts, crowd uproar, and players reacting to what they'd just witnessed. What followed was textbook basketball chaos. Players rushed into the key, eager to understand what the officials had seen and what the call meant for their team. Coaching staff members surged past the technical boundary, positioning themselves to potentially hear what the referees were discussing. Game officials struggled desperately to construct a human barrier between the increasingly agitated groups, trying to maintain control of a situation that was visibly escalating. To the millions watching the primary national television feed, this appeared to be standard sports theater playing out exactly as expected in high-stakes professional basketball. A physical foul, an upcoming video replay review to confirm whether the contact was excessive or simply aggressive competition, a seamless transition into a commercial break where analysts could debate what they'd witnessed. But beneath that surface appearance, something far different was unfolding. Stephanie White, standing inches away from the court boundary as head coach, was processing what she just witnessed. Her team had just absorbed a devastating physical blow delivered with absolute authority. Her player had just hit the ground hard. And in her assessment, the contact had crossed a line from aggressive competition into something more dangerous, more reckless, more threatening to her athlete's physical safety. The emotions coursing through her in that moment were immediate and intense. This wasn't a dispassionate moment to calmly explain a coaching perspective. This was raw, visceral frustration about what she was seeing happen to her players night after night. This was months of accumulated tension finding sudden explosive release. DeJonai Carrington, meanwhile, was processing the situation from a completely different perspective. She defended with intensity, as she always did. She'd executed what, from her perspective, was standard physical basketball. Nothing illegal, nothing dangerous. Just the kind of defense that elite players deliver when competition matters. And now, she was hearing what she perceived as criticism or questioning of her play style, her approach, her fundamental identity as a player. The space between them, though separated by several feet, became infinitely smaller as their voices began rising. This wasn't going to be a moment where cooler heads prevailed or where one person backed down from confrontation. Everything about their competitive identities made that impossible. What happened next, captured by those parabolic microphones, revealed something far deeper than a simple disagreement about a basketball play. The technical explanation for how the audio escaped seemed almost mundane when it was later revealed. A secondary parabolic microphone array positioned adjacent to the scoring table had been routed through an older backup transmission system that was supposed to be deactivated months earlier during a facility upgrade. But the deactivation process had been only partially completed. Documentation was incomplete. Someone had noted the intention to shut it down, but that task had been deprioritized during other operational emergencies and eventually forgot. What should have been a completely isolated, internal-only audio feed was inadvertently connected to a broader system architecture that included multiple redundancy pathways designed to ensure broadcast continuity. One of those pathways, through a series of technical missteps and routing mistakes, eventually created a connection that allowed the raw audio to escape into channels where it could be accessed, recorded, and distributed. But the technical explanation, while important for understanding how the breach happened, was almost irrelevant compared to what the audio actually contained. When viewers heard the leaked recording, they weren't hearing polished, media-trained exchanges. They weren't hearing the kind of carefully crafted statements that appear in post-game press conferences or official league communications. They were hearing human beings in the middle of an intense emotional moment, speaking with complete authenticity, completely unaware that anyone beyond those immediately present would ever hear their words. Stephanie White's voice pierced through the arena background noise with unmistakable intensity. She wasn't using measured, diplomatic language. She was expressing immediate, boiling rage about the force of the contact she'd just witnessed. Her accusations toward the opposing players were direct and personal, that they were engaging in unsafe physical maneuvers that put athlete health in direct jeopardy. Her demand that the game crew assert control before the contest devolved into an outright melee was unambiguous. She wasn't suggesting that things needed to change. She was declaring it as an urgent requirement. The language captured was raw and unfiltered. Censored utterances like, "Get this DMN mess under control," reverberated through the audio feed with a sharpness and hostility that no broadcast sanitizer had softened or modified. Every word carried the weight of someone who felt her athletes were being endangered and who wasn't going to accept that situation passively. DeJonai Carrington's response was equally immediate and equally unscripted. She didn't retreat from the confrontation. She didn't attempt to de-escalate or smooth over the tension. She fired back without hesitation, defending her aggressive defensive technique with absolute conviction. Her words made it abundantly clear that she would not be lectured, would not be intimidated, and would not accept criticism of her playing style from an opposing coach, regardless of their seniority or standing in the sport. The dialogue captured between them was not merely energetic or emotionally charged. It was deeply personal, stepping far over the unspoken boundary that separates normal competitive posturing from explicit accusations of reckless and potentially malicious execution. There were moments where the confrontation touched on questions of intent, questions of whether the physical play was crossing into dangerous territory, questions that implied something more troubling than simple athletic competition. The game officials found themselves caught directly in the line of fire, attempting to enforce order while absorbing extreme heat from both sides of the floor. Their authority was being questioned. Their competence was being challenged, and they had no effective way to respond that would satisfy either party or restore the kind of control that professional basketball games are supposed to maintain. Phrases rang out with brutal clarity. "Don't come at me with that bull, SHT," echoed through the audio with unmistakable hostility. There were moments where the conversation threatened to escalate further, where it seemed like the verbal exchange might transform into something more physically confrontational. The sheer tension captured in those 90 seconds was unmistakable, exposing a level of visceral frustration and genuine personal conflict that PR teams actively worked to erase from all official sports coverage. What made the audio particularly devastating wasn't just the language or the hostility. It was what the confrontation revealed about the underlying relationship between these figures. This wasn't a one-time flare-up. This was an explosion of months of accumulated tension, disagreements about playing style, questions about safety standards, and fundamental philosophical differences about how professional basketball should be played. The audio laid bare the reality that beneath the polished surface of professional sports, there exists a raw, unfiltered human conflict that the league's entire infrastructure is designed to conceal. And when that concealment fails, when that unscripted moment escapes into the public domain, everyone who hears it understands that something significant has been revealed about how the sport actually functions at the highest levels. The moment an alert viewer isolated the secondary audio file, clipped the timeline, and uploaded it straight to social media networks, the situation transformed from an internal league problem into a global phenomenon beyond anyone's ability to control. Within minutes of the final horn, the audio snippet had accumulated millions of views across video platforms, setting off an algorithmic chain reaction that would dominate sports feeds globally for days. The speed was stunning. Before league communications teams even fully understood what had happened, before executives finished their initial crisis assessment calls, the audio was already spreading exponentially across every major digital platform. Twitter exploded with clips and reactions. TikTok users were creating their own edited versions with dramatic overlays and commentary. Reddit forums dedicated to basketball were dissecting every cadence, every whisper, every explosive phrase with microscopic precision. Sports commentary channels immediately began covering the story, sensing the massive audience appetite for the unfolding drama. Tactical analysts broke down the physical contact frame by frame, debated whether the foul was justified, and analyzed whether the defensive play was actually dangerous or simply aggressive. Online creators jumped on the controversy, understanding that content addressing the leaked audio would generate exceptional engagement and visibility. The incident became the single most discussed topic on the web within hours, completely overshadowing the outcome of the game itself, rendering the final score and box statistics utterly irrelevant. The league's response was swift, but ultimately ineffective. Communications teams sent rapid-fire digital takedown notices to major content platforms, attempting to scrub the audio from sharing networks and remove copies of the leaked recording. Legal departments contacted video hosting services with cease and desist notices. Official channels issued statements requesting that people refrain from sharing the unauthorized audio. But here's where league executives encountered a problem that no amount of institutional authority could solve. They were operating in 2024 in an environment of perfect information distribution, where the Streisand effect was virtually guaranteed. Every deletion of the audio spawned dozens of mirrors. Every takedown notice that was served created additional copies uploaded to backup platforms, alternative networks, and obscure channels designed specifically to circumvent platform moderation. The league's aggressive efforts to suppress the audio didn't contain the story. They accelerated public curiosity exponentially. Within 18 hours, the leaked recording had gone from a niche sports controversy to mainstream television territory. Cable news networks that normally focused on entertainment industry gossip were running segments about the audio leak. Morning show hosts were playing clips and asking whether professional athletes should be held to different conduct standards than the general public. The story transcended sports journalism and entered the broader cultural conversation about privacy, authenticity, and what we expect from public figures. Sports radio morning studio shows spent hours analyzing every second of the leaked tape, bringing in former players and coaches to provide perspective on what the audio revealed. Independent podcasts dedicated entire episodes to debating the implications. Replays of the audio played continuously across digital platforms, becoming something approaching a cultural moment rather than just a sports incident. The public debate fractured immediately into opposing camps. One contingent, particularly hardcore basketball fans who valued authenticity, praised the unvarnished nature of the leak. They argued that hearing real, raw, emotional exchanges between elite competitors made professional sports exponentially more compelling than the sanitized, media-trained performances that normally appear in official coverage. They wanted more access, more behind-the-scenes moments, more authentic interaction captured by those court-level microphones. The opposing camp argued the exact opposite perspective. They insisted that unmonitored court microphones created a toxic environment, unfairly subjecting athletes and coaches to public outrage for split-second decisions made in the heat of athletic combat. They believed that professional athletes deserved the same expectation of privacy in tense moments that civilians might expect in their workplaces. Beyond those primary positions, wild speculation emerged online. Some fans theorized that the leak wasn't an accidental technical error at all. Online forums buzzed with theories that an insider from the broadcast operations had intentionally leaked the audio because they were fed up with league officiating policies. Others suggested that someone with access to league systems had decided that the public needed to hear the truth about how the sport actually functioned behind closed doors. These conspiracy-adjacent theories added kerosene to the narrative fire, converting a sports argument into a broader discussion about corporate control, media rights management, and whether the league was being transparent with the public. The sheer volume of engagement was extraordinary. Hashtags related to the incident trended globally. International sports media outlets began covering the story, understanding that this was becoming a significant cultural moment, not just a regional American sports controversy. The incident had generated more discussion and engagement than most playoff moments generated. The league was no longer controlling its own narrative. By the time Adam Silver and his executive team finished their initial crisis assessment, the story had already metastasized into something far larger than anyone could have anticipated. Behind closed doors at league headquarters in New York, the mood was approaching absolute panic. Adam Silver, who maintains ultimate oversight over the broader basketball enterprise, was described by multiple sources as incandescent with anger. Not merely disappointed, not simply concerned, genuinely furious about the speed and severity of the situation that was unfolding in real time across every digital platform and mainstream media outlet. The security breach itself was infuriating. How had a secondary audio feed escaped containment? How had backup systems that were supposed to be deactivated remained partially active? How had no one caught this during regular technical audits and system reviews? These weren't abstract questions. They represented a failure of the organizational infrastructure that hundreds of millions of dollars had been invested to create. But the security failure was actually the smaller piece of the crisis. The real problem was the reputational hit. For a league that spends astronomical sums building a polished, family-friendly, global entertainment commodity, Having raw, unfiltered hostile altercations broadcast without censorship represented a catastrophic breach of brand governance. Sponsors had invested hundreds of millions of dollars to associate their products with professional basketball, with the understanding that the content would be carefully curated, highly controlled, and appropriate for all audience demographics. Now, without any warning or ability to prevent it, those same sponsors were seeing clips of unfiltered hostility, uncensored language, and personal confrontation being discussed across family-friendly morning television shows. Marketing executives at major corporations were receiving calls from concerned colleagues asking whether their brand association with professional basketball had become risky. Industry insiders reported that Silver immediately summoned network executives and technical leads to an emergency conference call. This wasn't a standard operational review. This was an executive demanding exhaustive explanations for how secondary court-level audio feeds had bypassed automated delay systems that were specifically designed to prevent exactly this kind of situation. The conversation extended far beyond the technical minutiae of how the breach had occurred. The core executive concern struck at the heart of refereeing credibility, brand safety, and the commercial risk of losing blue-chip corporate sponsors who explicitly insist on squeaky clean programming environments. Multi-million-dollar advertising partners paying top dollar for primetime sports real estate do not want their family-friendly products adjacent to uncontrolled, hostility-filled athletic altercations broadcast globally without warning. Internal discussions immediately turned toward institutional responses. Severe financial penalties were being discussed, formal reprimands for everyone involved in the incident, potential game suspensions for any participants determined to have crossed league behavioral standards. The question became not whether there would be consequences, but how severe those consequences would be and whether they would be severe enough to demonstrate to sponsors and the public that the league took conduct standards seriously. Yet, while these emergency discussions were happening in executive suites, the central figures in the drama were being forced to face a different kind of pressure: the media. At mandatory post-game media availability, reporters crammed into briefing rooms were eager to ask direct questions about the sideline altercation and the leaked audio. This was their opportunity to get the story directly from the sources, to press both White and Carrington on what had actually been said, what had motivated their confrontation, and what it revealed about professional basketball at the highest levels. But both camps attempted to execute a carefully scripted exercise in PR deflection. When pressed about the physical contact and the heated exchange captured on tape, Stephanie White attempted to de-escalate the situation. She emphasized that the hostility was attributable to the natural intensity of high-stakes professional athletics. Basketball is an inherently emotional sport, she explained. Coaches are naturally going to be passionate about protecting their players. Her sole priority, she stressed, has always been standing up for the physical safety of her athletes. Notably, White meticulously avoided mentioning the leaked audio recording by name. She didn't discuss specific phrases or acknowledge the hostile language that millions of people had already heard. She didn't explain the personal nature of the confrontation. She presented a sanitized version designed to minimize the damage while hoping that the public would accept her explanation at face value. DeJonai Carrington addressed the media with careful composure, making similar arguments about the realities of high-level competition. Elite athletes are naturally going to clash when victory is on the line, she insisted. She flatly rejected claims of dirty play, arguing that her job is to play with relentless physical energy from edge to edge, and that she would never apologize for competing hard. She spoke about the importance of maintaining her identity as a player, of not allowing external pressure to force her to change her fundamental approach to the game. But despite their polished efforts to project professional calm and reasonable perspective, the underlying body language told an entirely different story. The visible gulf between their sanitized press statements and the unfiltered hostility that millions of people had heard on the recording only rendered the general public more skeptical. The press briefing felt performative, highlighting the stark contrast between corporate sports management and the real volatile emotions boiling inside locker rooms and coaching staffs. Social media immediately erupted with commentary about the disconnect between what the coaches were saying publicly and what they'd said when they thought nobody was listening. The credibility gap became another layer of the controversy, another reason for the public to discuss the incident further and question the authenticity of professional sports communications. To understand why this specific audio leak triggered such a severe institutional response, you need to understand the deeper context that preceded the viral moment. For many months prior to this high-profile incident, players, coaches, and team executives had quietly expressed deep-seated frustration regarding the standard and consistency of officiating across professional basketball. The frustration wasn't new. It had been building for years, becoming increasingly vocal as the game evolved and transformed. Modern players have grown faster, stronger, and more skilled than any previous generation. The athleticism on display in contemporary professional basketball is genuinely extraordinary. But with that increased athleticism has come an almost impossible challenge for game officials. How do you manage physical contact while preserving a fast, highly entertaining product for broadcast partners who are paying billions of dollars for the rights to distribute games? Numerous coaches throughout the league felt that extreme physical play was frequently overlooked by officials who were eager to keep play continuous, who prioritized flow over technical precision, who wanted to avoid making every possession into a foul-calling exercise. These coaches believed players were increasingly taking matters into their own hands to protect themselves on the court, because they couldn't trust that referees would provide adequate protection. Conversely, defensive specialists and their advocates argued that constant whistleblowing stifled the natural flow of competition, penalizing hard-nosed athletic defense and turning games into free-throw shooting contests. They contended that modern basketball was becoming increasingly soft, that defensive intensity was being discouraged rather than celebrated, and that the game was losing one of its fundamental elements. The leaked audio touched such a sensitive nerve because it confirmed what fans had long suspected but never heard directly from league figures. These frustrations were not merely tactical debates discussed in post-game video reviews. They were deeply felt personal conflicts exploding during live play, unscripted emotional reactions that revealed the genuine tension underneath professional basketball's polished surface. When a respected veteran head coach feels driven to verbally confront an opposing star player, when that confrontation becomes hostile enough that officials are struggling to maintain control, it indicates something more serious than a disagreement about a specific call. It indicates a total breakdown in the authority of game officials, a situation where coaches and players no longer trust that the referees will protect them or enforce standards consistently. The recording exposed an acute structural debate regarding where the boundary between hard physical defense and dangerous athletic play must be drawn. It wasn't an abstract philosophical question anymore. It was a real problem being lived out in real time by the people actually playing and coaching the game. League leaders suddenly had no choice but to confront the issue directly. In the days following the viral release, the broader basketball community engaged in extensive public debate about what the audio revealed. Former veteran players jumped into the conversation, and many found themselves defending Carrington's aggressive play style as standard physical basketball that has existed for decades. They argued that contemporary fans, media members, and corporate executives had become overly sensitive about contact and intensity. Sharp trash talk and heated sideline exchanges had always been foundational elements of professional basketball, they insisted. What was being presented as shocking or problematic was actually just the normal, expected emotional atmosphere of elite athletic competition. Other league veterans countered strongly, taking White's perspective and asserting that player safety must take absolute priority. They emphasized that particularly when modern play speed increases the likelihood of catastrophic injuries, physical play needs to be constantly monitored and controlled. They worried that permitting the level of intensity captured on the audio would eventually lead to serious injuries that could derail careers or cause long-term damage to athletes' bodies. The broader fan base fractured into opposing camps across digital platforms, each with their own perspective on what the audio meant and what should happen as a result. One contingent praised the unvarnished authenticity of the leak, arguing that hearing real, raw emotional exchanges made professional sports exponentially more compelling to watch than packaged PR entertainment. They wanted more access, more authenticity, more unfiltered moments from the people they followed and supported. The opposing camp argued that unmonitored court microphones created a toxic environment, unfairly subjecting athletes and coaches to public outrage for split-second decisions made in the heat of combat. They worried that permitting this kind of exposure would lead to social media pylons, harassment campaigns, and a toxic environment where every emotional moment was being dissected and weaponized by strangers online. Yet regardless of which perspective viewers found compelling, everyone agreed on one core reality. The leak had permanently altered how court-level audio would need to be managed by sports networks moving forward. The question wasn't whether changes would be implemented. It was what form those changes would take, and whether they would ultimately serve the league's interests or the interests of athletes and the public that watched them. In the immediate aftermath of the viral explosion, the league's response shifted from crisis management into institutional restructuring. Behind the scenes, broadcast engineering teams immediately launched sweeping reviews of floor microphone setups, parabolic array placements, and the entire stream delivery architecture that moved audio from court level to broadcast centers. Every single secondary audio routing pathway was audited. Technical directors received explicit directives from league management to guarantee that unedited ambient microphone feeds could never bleed into live internet feeds, could never leak into secondary language streams used for international distribution, could never accidentally find their way into any public-facing channel ever again. The technical infrastructure that had served the league for years was suddenly viewed as a security vulnerability requiring total overhaul. New isolation protocols were implemented. Backup systems that had been partially deactivated during earlier upgrades were completely removed. Redundancy pathways that might create accidental access points were systematically eliminated. The league was essentially re-engineering its broadcast infrastructure from the ground up, prioritizing information control above almost every other consideration. League operations sent formal notices to all franchises, sternly reiterating conduct standards near team benches and warning that future verbal standoffs or obscene exchanges would be met with immediate, unannounced fines and potential suspensions. The message was unmistakable. The league was taking conduct standards seriously, and everyone involved with professional basketball operations needed to understand the consequences of future incidents. Yet despite these aggressive institutional safeguards and technical overhauls, the fundamental problem remained impossible to fully solve. The public's appetite for raw access to professional athletes and coaches had already been forever altered by experiencing those 90 seconds of unfiltered audio. Modern audiences now demanded a level of behind-the-scenes access that sports entertainment organizations spent millions of dollars attempting to sanitize and control. The incident proved something that everyone already suspected, but was now undeniable. In an era dominated by hyperconnectivity, ubiquitous camera coverage, and high-gain directional microphones, keeping operational secrets or concealing genuine athlete hostility is an almost impossible administrative task. Technology had fundamentally changed the equation. The court floor is no longer an isolated venue where private conversations remain private. It operates as an open mic arena, where every word, gesture, and physical contest is captured, processed, and broadcast to millions within seconds. As the current season progressed, the fallout from this audio controversy continued casting a long shadow over both organizations whenever they stepped onto the hardwood. Every physical whistle by referees was suddenly subjected to intense public scrutiny. Contested rebounds triggered immediate social media speculation. Technical fouls were analyzed not just for their immediate implications, but for what they revealed about underlying conflicts. Television networks, sensing the public appetite for drama, constantly zoomed in on bench interactions to catch subtle reactions, to document emotions, to provide content that extended the narrative beyond what was officially happening in the game. Every moment involving Carrington, every sideline interaction involving White, became content worthy of broadcast and social media circulation. Carrington continued to play her signature brand of high-impact basketball, steadfastly refusing to tone down her edge despite constant media focus and opposing fan pressure. She made a deliberate choice not to alter her playing style in response to external pressure or criticism. White remained singularly focused on steering her roster through a brutal schedule, trying desperately to leave sideline distractions behind and concentrate on the actual work of basketball coaching and team building. But the cultural precedent established by this audio leak had permanently reconfigured the relationship between live sports performance and the viewing public. It proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the most captivating moments in contemporary sports do not always occur on the digital scoreboard or result in immediate statistical impact. Frequently, they happen in those brief, unscripted seconds when the microphones remain hot long after the broadcast truck was supposed to cut the feed. Future conversations about privacy in professional sports would inevitably reference this incident. Players would become increasingly aware that anything said on court level could potentially escape containment. Coaches would adjust their communication styles, adopt tactics seen in international soccer, where staff members cover their mouths with clipboards or hands to prevent lip reading and audio capture during heated moments. The league had demonstrated both its power and its limitations. It could implement new technical safeguards. It could issue severe financial penalties. It could threaten suspensions and formal discipline. But it couldn't eradicate the fundamental human need to express authentic emotion in moments of genuine competition and conflict. Taking a broader view of the contemporary athletic landscape, this high-profile conflict raises fundamental questions about where athlete privacy ends and commercial entertainment begins. The answer, increasingly, appears to be that there is no clear boundary anymore, and that ambiguity creates constant tension between what leagues want and what the public demands. Sports media companies continue to push for unprecedented viewer access, driven by the understanding that authenticity drives ratings and engagement. They outfit players with micro-pack microphones during games. They place high-definition cameras inside huddles and locker rooms during preparation. They broadcast locker room pep talks and timeout strategy sessions. They position parabolic microphones throughout arenas to capture sideline conversations. The cumulative effect is that the probability of capturing raw, unscripted moments increases exponentially with every technological innovation. Sports leagues desperately want the high-voltage passion, intense rivalries, and dramatic storylines that authenticity generates. Those exact elements drive television ratings, streaming subscriptions, and digital advertising revenue. The emotional intensity of professional sports, the genuine competitiveness, the real human conflict between people fighting for competitive advantage, those things are genuinely compelling and commercially valuable. But corporate boards simultaneously demand those emotional elements delivered in a controlled, highly polished package that completely shields sponsors from any risk and maintains brand safety across all demographics. Families watching games with their children should not be exposed to hostile language or aggressive confrontations. Professional athletes are considered role models, and their behavior needs to reflect that responsibility. The league's brand identity depends on maintaining a certain image and standard of conduct. When real human emotion breaks through that sanitized barrier, when an authentic moment escapes the containment systems designed to prevent exactly that situation, the resulting explosive viral moment captivates the public while simultaneously horrifying league executives. Everyone wants authenticity until that authenticity contradicts the carefully curated image the league is trying to maintain. Adam Silver and his executive team have the power to write strict new regulations regarding court-level audio. They can install multi-second delay cutoffs before any secondary feeds become available to broadcast. They can fine athletes who step out of line, suspend players for conduct violations, and discipline coaches for failure to maintain professional standards. But they cannot eradicate the fundamental human competitiveness that fuels elite athletics. As long as top-tier athletes risk their bodies for victory, and coaches fight desperately for every strategic advantage, fiery confrontations will occur. Heated exchanges between competitors will happen. Moments of genuine human conflict will explode during live competition. The only variable is whether those moments get captured by microphones and broadcast to the world, or whether they remain contained within the arena walls. The key difference in the modern era is that the entire world is listening with high-powered microphones, waiting to capture the next unscripted moment before the network feed goes dark. Every technological advancement designed to provide viewers with more access simultaneously creates vulnerabilities that the league cannot fully control. The long-term ramifications of this specific audio breach will inevitably extend into future collective bargaining negotiations between player unions and league owners. Athlete representatives are growing increasingly vocal regarding how player voice, personal privacy, and court-level conversations are captured, monetized, and weaponized across digital media platforms. If candid on-court dialogue can be leaked to the public and used to generate viral outrage or trigger league fines, players may demand absolute veto power over media microphone pack requests during live gameplay. They may insist on limitations regarding where parabolic microphones can be positioned. They may require that all captured audio from court level be permanently deleted within specified timeframes rather than archived for potential future use. This ongoing battle between broadcast access demands and athlete privacy rights represents one of the most complex operational challenges facing modern sports executives. Every technical step taken toward providing fans with ultimate access creates massive organizational vulnerabilities for leagues striving to present a unified, highly polished public image. Every additional camera, every new microphone, every new angle creates potential exposure points where authentic human behavior might escape carefully constructed boundaries. The fundamental tension is unresolvable within the current framework. Audiences want authenticity, but only authenticity that matches their expectations and values. Leagues want engagement and ratings, but only the kind of engagement that serves their commercial interests. Athletes want privacy and protection, but also want their contributions recognized and celebrated. Those competing demands cannot all be simultaneously satisfied. What remains clear is that the audio leak involving Stephanie White and DeJonai Carrington fundamentally changed something about professional basketball's relationship with the public. The secret is out. Everyone now knows that raw, unfiltered conflict exists beneath the polished surface. And no amount of new regulations or technical safeguards will be able to put that knowledge back into the box. This leaked audio recording became more than just a viral moment. It exposed the impossible paradox at the heart of modern professional sports. The league cannot simultaneously provide the authentic access audiences crave while maintaining the sanitized brand control that corporate sponsors demand. Adam Silver's furious response revealed an uncomfortable truth. The league is fighting a losing battle against technology and public curiosity. For every security measure implemented, for every backup system disabled, for every regulation instituted, the fundamental reality remains unchanged. Professional athletes are human beings experiencing genuine emotion in moments of genuine competition. And in an era of ubiquitous microphones and instant global distribution, authentic moments will inevitably escape no matter how many protocols exist to prevent it. The incident also exposed deeper systemic issues about officiating consistency, player safety standards, and the growing frustration within the professional basketball community that nobody with authority seemed willing to address through legitimate channels. Perhaps the leak, for all its chaos and controversy, forced the league to confront problems that had been quietly festering for years. What happens next will define whether professional sports can evolve toward greater transparency, or whether leagues will continue fighting a technological battle they're increasingly unlikely to win. Either way, the world changed the moment that 90-second recording escaped into the public sphere. And neither Adam Silver nor professional basketball will ever fully recover from the implications of that moment.